Hello, it's me again. The trees haven't changed, but every time I'm out here, it feels like maybe today's the day. Maybe you're hoping for that too. Sitting in your car with a cup of coffee, or taking a morning walk, or just listening in because you believe the world isn't as small as it seems. However, you found your way here, I'm really glad we get to search together. This is episode 2 of Beyond the Trees, The Hidden Truth About Bigfoot. Ep- Evidence that vanishes. So let's be honest, right up front. Last time, we wandered through the roots of the Bigfoot story, trailed through threads of indigenous memory, and asked what it means to chase something bigger than ourselves. But this time, I want to talk about the weird stuff. The stuff I can't make sense of. Even after picking through books, stories, and skeptical side eyes on the internet, today is about the evidence, not just the classic tracks, those huge, deep, unnerving marks you see cast in plaster, the kind featured in every documentary. I want to explore the moments when the tracks appear with all the certainty of stone and then blink out. They're just gone. Have you ever picked up a trail that vanishes like smoke? What's that about? What are you supposed to do with evidence that dissolves the minute you follow it? I think about this all the time, especially when I'm out there with my boots in the mud, looking at a print, half believing and half doubting. What truth can you grab when even the evidence disappears? Is it all a trick of the wild? Or are we staring at something that refuses to fit the neat lines we draw around reality? Let's talk this out together. I want to ask, why do Bigfoot's tracks appear and disappear with no logical explanation? Is this pure myth, a mistake of weather and soil? Or is there something in this mystery worth keeping alive? A space for your own wonder. Let's stop off the trail and see where the footprints really lead. Standing in the silence of a forest, every stick and stone underfoot, the idea of a massive print, one nobody can explain, should be anticlimactic, right? But it's the opposite. There's something deeply human about stumbling upon a track in the mud, a shape pressed into the earth where nothing else makes sense. It's tactile, relatable, primal even. Maybe that's why across North America reports of Bigfoot almost always begin with prints. Sure, you get stories of a shadow crossing a logging trail or a noisy tree knot echoing at night, but the footprints, that's the anchor. You can see it, photograph it, run your hand along the outline. That's real, at least more relatable than a fleeting glimpse of fur through the trees. But what's strange is how quickly that reality slips away. Look at the modern legend. In 1958, those enormous Bigfoot prints circled a construction site in Northern California. Crew members measured them at 16 inches, way too big and deep for any human. Those tracks became the story that launched the name. And for a lot of folks, the belief that there was something out there bigger than science wanted to admit. But even then, skepticism crept in. Some of those prints, hoaxes, plain and simple. Later, it turned out the original Bluff Creek tracks might have been carved by a prankster with wooden feet. But in the decades since, new prints kept turning up, some with anatomical details that seem nearly impossible to fake. Are hundreds of people lying? Is the forest in on the joke? And here's where things take the twist that keeps me awake some nights. The tracks that seem to defy logic altogether. Prints that start in open ground and abruptly stop. Trails that cross snow and just end. No sign of where it went. What does it mean when solid physical evidence refuses to play by the rules? Why is it that the more you dig, the less solid the ground becomes beneath your feet. Maybe the most honest place to start is just to say, I don't know, but I can't stop looking. And there's something about those vanishing tracks that feels impossibly like a message, one I haven't yet learned to read. Before the Bigfoot craze of the mid 20th century, before the castings in blurry films, stories of giant footprints in the wild roamed the memories of this land. For the Salish, the Lakota, Cherokee, and hundreds of other tribes, the presence of tracks, some obvious, some nearly lost to time, was embedded in a worldview that didn't see nature as simple scenery, but as alive, responsive, and sometimes tricksterish. For many indigenous people, the track isn't just a clue left behind, it's a message, often from a being that sits halfway between the natural and spiritual worlds. Sometimes the appearance of a footprint was a warning, as a sign that you're treading where you shouldn't, that the wild is watching, that power moves through the land in ways we don't always see. The Yakut tell of Mayak Datat, the hairy man, whose enormous tracks are preserved not just in story, but in ancient petroglyphs carved into stone on the Tule River Reservation. The figure is sometimes seen as a guardian, sometimes a spirit who upholds boundaries between worlds. Tracks appear briefly, leading into the hard to reach places, then vanish, as if to remind us that this world will not be mapped or explained away. I can't help but wonder, if I'd grown up with these stories, would I ever expect a footprint to last forever? In other traditions, the sudden absence of tracks signals more than just the disappearing animal. It's an invitation to humility. Maybe the land is telling you to look, but not approach lightly. That some mysteries exist purely to unsettle, to ask you to step carefully, to remember you're always the visitor in these woods. Doesn't that feel different from the way we treat evidence? With our rulers and forensic tools, there's a kind of wisdom in accepting that only part of the trail will ever be revealed. I once heard that for the Salish people, finding a footprint that ends abruptly was a signal. You're not meant to follow here. This is not for you. Makes you wonder, right? Sometimes, maybe the end of the tracks is not a mystery to be solved, but a line not to cross. But that's not how most of us are wired. We keep chasing. Now, can we balance that urge to chase, really? Anyone who's been gripped by the Bigfoot phenomenon knows chasing the unknown is half the fun, half the madness. But it's not just a hobbyist fantasy. There are real, documented cases throughout North American history where credible witnesses find tracks that seem to pull a vanishing act. The pattern repeats in news articles, expedition journals, and even FBI memos. Tracks found, examined with excitement and sometimes dread, only to run out inexplicably, as if the earth itself swallowed the evidence. Maybe the most famous case is the Patterson-Gimlin encounter at Bluff Creek in 1967. Here's what's strange. Not only was there film, the famous Patty footage, but the ground was littered with clear, detailed tracks. Yet, just as often as casts were made, the imprint trail would suddenly be lost in roots or debris with no sign of where the creature exited. Investigators, some hardened skeptics, would scratch their heads. No break in the pattern, no gradual wearing away, just the trail gone. And they're not alone. Reports span from snowy plateaus in Washington state to the muddy backroads of East Texas. Sightings involving cops, loggers, hikers, hunters, people not inclined to spin yarns or seek attention. They all say the same thing. We found the prints, but when we tried to follow, they just ended. No scat, no broken twigs, nothing. Is this a case of careful hoaxing, uncanny animal intelligence, or are we missing something obvious? I remember reading about a case where footprints headed straight across a snowy field, then vanished at a barbed wire fence. No sign of jumping, no doubling back, just gone. Other reports tell of tracks starting in thin air or disappearing at the edge of a creek. Doesn't that get under your skin? Even the most rational person has to wonder, are these all mistakes, hoaxes, or is the wild hiding something untamable? I'm all for skepticism, but what do you do with stories that keep coming generation after generation, as persistent as rain in the mountains? When the mystery feels too thick, I turn to science. Could it all be a trick of the terrain? A gap in our understanding of how tracks form and fade? Footprint science has a fancy name: taphonomy, the study of how traces left behind by living things survive, or don't, after they're gone. And here's the kicker: footprints are more fragile than most people imagine. Neil Roach's 2016 field study of ancient tracks in Kenya proved it. Volunteers walked along the shores of Lake Turkana. The crisp, detailed prints began eroding within hours. After a day and a half, almost all lost definition. After 5 days, only 10% survived as faint outlines. After a month, just 2% were still visible at all. Suddenly, the story of disappearing tracks doesn't seem too magical. It's just the brutal reality of weather, soil, sunlight, and time. Even under ideal conditions, the window for finding a pristine track is measured in hours, maybe days. The famous Bluff Creek prints in 1967 only survived thanks to perfect timing. Angular sand particles of brief light rain that acted like glue. For a giant footprint to last, the environment has to conspire in your favor. Most forest floors aren't like that. They're hard packed, rooty, rocky, mossy, surfaces that eat evidence, not save it. So maybe the answer isn't paranormal. Maybe it's just science. Rain collapses tracks in minutes, wind and forest erase them in a night, animal traffic tramples them into nothing. And any hoaxer sticking around to maintain a fake trail wouldn't last under scrutiny. Yet, I keep circling back to the personal stories. The ones where a witness walks away, returns minutes later, and the print they saw is just gone. Not washed, not trampled, gone. Is that possible? Or is it a trick of the light and memory? Wishful seeing and real seeing tumbling together. Sometimes it almost feels like the land itself is playing a joke. Nature is good at hiding, so is our own desire to find meaning in chaos. But sometimes the tracks do stay. They last in an astonishing detail, photographed, cast in plaster, argued over on late night radio. Bluff Creek is the classic example. October 1967. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin set out searching for evidence. Not only did they film the infamous footage, but they also found a fresh trail of prints. Over a dozen were so clear, so deep, that plaster casts still survive today. Experts and skeptics alike examine them. Their noted pressure ridges, mid-torsal breaks, deep, consistent strides, conditions were one in a million. But even here, the disappearing act appeared. In some spots, the tracks just ended, not only at water's edge, but midfield, where the substrate changed only slightly. Rain overnight nearly destroyed them, but in a twist of luck or fate, Bob Titmus arrived in 9 days later and still managed to cast prints. Stories like this make you want to believe. Even skeptics admit not all these prints can be dismissed with a roll of the eyes, but they also highlight the unpredictability. Why were some sharp, others awash? Why did the trail continue sometimes just stop? The scientist in me wants a clean answer. The storyteller in me hopes the mystery never goes away. Okay, it's 2025. You'd think with trail cams, drones, DNA swabs, we'd have a solution by now. No, the mystery is stranger than ever. Some say Bigfoot is simply smart, stepping carefully, sticking to the rocks, doubling back. But if that's true, why leave any prints at all? Skeptics lean hard into hoaxing, and honestly, you can't blame them. Plenty of discoveries were traced to tricksters with wooden feet and taste for attention. But not all cases crack so easily. Some tracks show anatomical detail that's nearly impossible to fake. And many witnesses aren't chasing fame. They're just ordinary folk caught off guard by something they can't explain. Then there's the wild edge, theories about portals, interdimensional beings, creatures slipping between worlds. Sounds like science fiction, but when prints vanish in open snow or in mid bank, your certainty starts to wobble. What if the answer isn't in the creature itself, but in the way nature and perception collide? Sometimes a print is just a print. Sometimes it's a message. You've reached the limit of what you get to know today. And maybe the feeling of not knowing is actually the prize. Isn't there something wonderful about a world where, even with all our tools, the forest still keeps secrets? Now, I moved to Ohio back in 2009. We used to fish out at Saltport Lake all the time, just outside of Cambridge. One evening, I went out alone around 6 o'clock to do some night fishing. It had been raining off and on all day, but the fishing was good, so I stayed as long as I could. It was close to about midnight when I heard something strange from across the lake. First, this howl, long, drawn out, and not anything I had ever heard before. A few moments later, right across from me on the opposite bank, maybe 100 yards or so, I heard two sharp knocks, like someone hitting a tree with a bat. Then came a splash. Not a small one either. It sounded like someone chunking a boulder into the water. A few days later, I went back with my girlfriend to a different part of the lake. It was near a public boat ramp. We just settled in when she pointed down at the water's edge. There was a spot where it looked like something had stepped. That's when I saw it. A single giant footprint in the mud right at the waterline, maybe 16 to 18 inches long. Now, I'm not saying it was a Bigfoot track. There was only one and it was half in the water. But with what I had heard just days before, it makes you wonder. I took a photo of it that day and still have it. I even went back recently and filmed the area. That video's coming soon. Uh, is it any wonder people keep seeking these tracks even when they vanish? There's more going on than mud and forensics. Psychologists studying Bigfoot encounters note the emotional complexity witnesses report, a tug of war between belief and skepticism. Even scientists who dismiss the phenomenon can't ignore what it leaves behind: wonder, ambiguity, the ache of wanting the world to be bigger and stranger than it seems. Is it possible we need the vanishing tracks? That our brains are wired for unresolved mysteries, for puzzles that end in question marks and the sound of wind through the trees? Maybe this tension, uncertainty versus certainty, is the deeper story. I sometimes wonder if the real gift of these vanishing prints isn't proof, but humility. A reminder that even in a world mapped by satellites, some questions should remain unanswered. That sometimes the land gets to write its own story. So, what do we do with all of this? Do we give up, accept only what science can document? Or do we lean into the mystery and let the footprints lead off the trail? Maybe the best answer is both. Indigenous elders preserved the stories not to prove or disprove, but to remind us the world is alive with secrets. Early loggers argued over hoaxes, but the legend grew anyway. Modern researchers cast tracks, but more often than not, they fade before anything conclusive is found. But the story lingers, tracks vanish, curiosity stays, fear stays, hope stays, awe stays. That may be the most important footprint of all. If you ever find yourself following a track that disappears, remember the end of the trail isn't always the ending. Sometimes it's an invitation, sometimes it's the forest nudging you to look up, breathe deep, and realize you're walking at the edge of what the world wants you to see. Is that enough for you? For me, most days, it is. The fire's almost embers now. We've wandered far together, into the shadows beneath the trees. We followed hidden trails, chased after the faintest whispers in the dark, and stumbled across truths so well buried they almost don't want to be found. Maybe somewhere in those tangled woods, we all glimpsed a piece of ourselves, a fear overcome, a hope rekindled, the kind of secret that changes the way you walk home. In this episode, we found it's not just about what lies out there, is it? It was about what we carry within, the hidden strengths, the doubts, the urge to push past our own shadows. Sometimes the wildest mystery isn't what lies in the dark, but why we feel drawn towards it in the first place. So if you felt that chill, if the forest secret called to you tonight, don't keep it to yourself. Go ahead, like this video if the story stirred something in you. Subscribe if you want to keep walking this winding path with us. And please, share this journey with someone who loves a good mystery, or maybe just needs to hear that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find something new. But listen, this tale isn't quite over. Next time, we'll venture beyond the edge of the map. And in episode 3, we'll follow the tracks no one else dares to. What waits out there, past the stories we tell, and into the secrets we don't, could rewrite everything we think now. Are you ready to see what lurks in the spaces between the trees? I can't wait to sit by the fire with you again next week. Until then, keep listening for what the night has to say.